Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to do a very brief video, hopefully, because I have the tendency to speak way too much, on carbohydrates consumption around the workout to minimize cortisol response and maximize the training effect. So if you haven't done so already, make sure that you check the channel out, subscribe, and like everything. So PERI-WORKOUT carbohydrates, why, when, and how much is today's topic. So I won't read the warning because you can just read it over, but please be sure to subscribe, like, and hit the bell thingy. And if you make the effort of taking a screen capture and read the message, you will see that I have a very good sense of humor. And that one more reason to like this video. Anyway, let's get on with it. Carbohydrates around the workout, which has been the big thing, in my opinion, in workout nutrition over the past 10 or so years. It used to be so, like when I was growing up in the strength training community, when I was training as an athlete myself, the big thing was loading up on carbohydrates after the workout. Coach Charles Poliquin was likely the first one to make that recommendation. And of course, I abide by it, and it worked. But when it comes to the modern science, what we know about the body, it might not be the best way to do things, at least not all the time. Carbohydrates are a powerful tool, yet because they are simply a nutrient, they are not as sexy as some of the supplements that we want to use. But in reality, it's one of the most powerful tools you can use to both modulate the quality of your workout and also how your body will adapt to training by modulating cortisol and adrenaline. So just look a few things here. By the way, if you want to learn more about cortisol, adrenaline, and carbohydrates, be sure to watch my first video on the differences between enhanced and natural lifters. Even though it's more about the difference between those two types of lifter, there's like a 30 minutes part talking solely about cortisol, adrenaline, and overtraining and lack of gains. And you will see that modulating cortisol and adrenaline are two of the most important things you can do to maximize your gains and also keep your well-being up. So just a few quick points here. During and before, especially when you're anticipating a hard workout, cortisol will be released to help you train. Okay, cortisol is not the enemy that what many lifters believe to be. You can't train hard without cortisol. Okay, cortisol will increase adrenaline level. It does so by increasing the conversion of noradrenaline into adrenaline. The adrenaline itself will increase energy, drive, motivation, aggressiveness, competitiveness, will also positively impact the strength of your muscle, the strength of your heart, so it can actually contract harder. Your heart rate will go up, your blood pressure goes up. The reason for that is to give you everything you need to be able to kill a tiger with your bare hands if you face it, or run away from that tiger. So your muscles are stronger, contracting faster, you're more aggressive, you're more motivated, your heart can send more blood, more oxygen to the muscles so you don't run out of fuel. So basically the adrenaline allows you to fight or flight, okay? Cortisol is also used to mobilize stored energy and maintain a stable blood sugar level. That is where those carbohydrates around the workout come in. So two things to remember. First, cortisol and adrenaline are connected. You can't increase cortisol without increasing adrenaline. And by extension, if you lower cortisol too much, you also don't get the adrenaline. Second point, the cortisol is related to the need to mobilize stored energy. When we think of cortisol as a hormone that breaks down your muscle tissue, that's that function. It breaks down muscle tissue, not because it wants you to be smaller. It breaks down muscle tissue so you can use those amino acids to fabricate fuel, okay? Just so that you never run out of fuel when fighting a tiger or running away from a tiger. Bad time to run out of fuel, okay? So it's those last two functions that relates to carbohydrates in this video, because you can actually modulate somewhat the cortisol and adrenaline response by ingesting carbohydrates. So if you have plenty of energy readily available, for example, or if your blood sugar stays in normal range when you're training because you're consuming carbohydrates, there's much less of a need to increase cortisol, because one of the main stimulus of cortisol is actually mobilizing stored energy. So if you have energy there, you don't need to mobilize as much. You still get cortisol from the stress of the training, but not as much from the energy need, okay? So you can modulate it. So it actually has been shown in several studies, carbohydrates have, that it can actually lower cortisol level when consumed pre and intra-workout. It can be a good thing, but also a bad thing, because if you see cortisol as the enemy, great, I want cortisol to go as low as possible, good thing. But if you bring it down too much, you can actually negatively impact the quality of your workout by decreasing adrenaline, which will decrease energy, drive motivation, aggressiveness, muscle strength, muscle speed, coordination, heart contraction strength, etc. Okay, so you need to understand the real impact of carbohydrates, the good, the bad, and how you can use them to your advantage. Okay, the purpose of carbohydrates peri-workout, why they can be useful. First, they provide energy for the intense muscle contraction. Even though folks will disagree, the fact is when you are producing high intensity muscle contraction like you do in lifting weights, carbohydrates will always be a more efficient fuel than fat and even ketones. Okay, that's not disputable. For endurance activities, ketone might be better, but for strength workout, for hypertrophy workout, especially for a higher volume hypertrophy workout, carbohydrates are your main fuel, so performance will be better. Second, you decrease the cortisol response if you already have carbohydrates energy readily available. If your blood sugar level is stable or fairly high, you don't need to produce as much cortisol. You still get the cortisol release from the stress of the workout, but not from the energy requirement. Can facilitate amino acid uptake by the working muscle. That's the cool thing. When you're training, it's the only time where you can actually decide where the nutrients you have in your body will be shuttled to. If I eat protein, carbohydrates in the middle of the day, the body will spread it where everybody, to all the tissue where it's needed. When you're training, if you have amino acids in your bloodstream, you will favor sending it to the muscle that is being contracted, because the contraction itself create what we call non-insulin mediated transport. It actually pulls the blood to the working muscle, and if that blood is loaded with amino acids, then you will send those amino acids to the working muscle, bringing those amino acids, the building block, directly where they will be needed after the session, okay? Now, if you have carbohydrates on top of that, you can facilitate the process by impacting the GLUT4 section, and also by increasing insulin somewhat, increasing nutrients entry inside the muscle. It can also help preserve intramuscular glycogen store. So at the end of the workout, if you didn't have any glucose or carbohydrates inside the workout or pre-workout, you probably use mostly intramuscular glycogen for fuel. After the session, the first recovery step will be to replenish those stores, okay? But if you have carbohydrates during the workout, you don't have to rely as much on that intramuscular glycogen, so you can actually preserve it. There's much less of a need to replenish it after the workout. Now, why is that important? Because after the workout, it can be harder to replenish that muscle glycogen if adrenaline and cortisol stays high. As long as cortisol stay high, you are in mobilization mode. Your body will be much less efficient at storing nutrients, including carbohydrates. So if cortisol stays elevated for an hour or so after 2 hours after a session, during those 2 hours, for example, you'll be much less efficient at storing muscle glycogen. You can still do it, it's just not as efficient. So if you have the carbs during the workout, you are using those carbs for fuel. You don't empty up your glycogen stores after the session, even if if glucose or if cortisol is high, you don't have to replenish as much, so there's much less of a problem. Finally, it can also provide fuel for the nervous system, which is important for intense work or heavy work. Okay, so these are the purposes of carbs peri-workout. Now, what are the potential downsides? because they are. It's not, I'm going to consume so much carbs, bro, that I will have no cortisol. I will build muscle like crazy. It doesn't work like that, okay? If you have too much carbohydrates, too many carbohydrates, you could actually lower cortisol too much, which leads to lower adrenaline level, making it much harder to perform during your session, especially if it's a heavy workout. If it's a pump work, that won't affect you as much because you don't need to be like laser-like focused, aggressive when I'm doing sets of 20 reps on the triceps kickback. But if I'm doing heavy deadlifts, heavy benches, heavy squats, power cleans, whatever, I want adrenaline to be higher if I want to perform, okay? Now, it can also lead to reactive hypoglycemia. So if you eat carbs pre-workout, you will get an insulin spike. And because during the session, you are using glucose for fuel, blood sugar goes down. Because insulin is high, blood sugar goes down. So it's actually possible to get a sugar crash mid-workout if you consume too many carbohydrates or the wrong kind of carbohydrates, okay? A carbohydrate that will spike insulin can lead to reactive hypoglycemia during the workout, which will make you woozy, will decrease performance, will make you just feel overall bad. But on top of that, you can actually have a cortisol rebound because of the reactive hypoglycemia. The goal of carbs during the workout is to lower cortisol. But if you have the wrong type of carbs or too many carbs before the workout, you can actually have a big insulin spike. And the insulin level going into the workout, coupled with the fact that you are using most of your glycogen for your glucose for fuel, can lower blood sugar level way too low. Then you have hypoglycemia, reactive hypoglycemia. Blood sugar level is down. What does the body do when blood sugar is down? It increases glucagon, increases cortisol. So now you wanted to use the carbs to lower cortisol, but by creating that reactive hypoglycemia, you actually spike cortisol even more. That's why the type of carbohydrate and the amount is really important. Personally, I recommend highly branched cyclic dextrin. The reason, and it's been shown in studies, that it actually provide more of a sustained energy, maintain blood sugar level stable for longer. It doesn't spike blood sugar level, doesn't increase insulin production. It's funny because from a digestion standpoint, it's absorbed like a very, very fast carbohydrate, very easy to digest, no stress on the digestive system, but it doesn't elevate blood sugar level like a quick sugar. It basically elevates blood sugar level like a complex carb. So the cool thing is it will maintain that stable blood sugar level, giving you energy, preventing reactive hypoglycemia, preventing a cortisol spike. So that's a win-win situation. A study looked at the differences between highly branched cyclic dextrin and dextrose with repeat swimming performance. And highly branched cyclic dextrin increased performance in a fatigue state, but dextrose didn't. In fact, he had a decrease in performance, and it was the reactive hypoglycemia was the reason why the dextrose, which caused a spike in insulin, coupled with the high energy expenditure, led to a crash in blood sugar, leading to hypoglycemia and a decrease in performance. So highly branched cyclic dextrin would be my carb of choice to use around the workout, especially if you're taking it before and during. After, it's a different animal, but before and during, highly branched cyclic dextrins would be my carb of choice. Now, when to use carbs around the workout, you need to understand what they do and what they can cause as a downside. First, carbs pre and intra workout are good for lowering cortisol, allowing you to do a bit more volume without risking overproducing cortisol. But they can actually decrease performance, especially in high-intensity situation, by decreasing adrenaline. Now, if you have no carbs pre and intra workout, it will help you perform better because you will produce more cortisol, which will lead to more adrenaline, which will lead to better performance in intense work. However, it can leave you open for training burnout, to overproducing cortisol, which can have drawbacks when it comes to building muscle. Carbs post-workout can help bring cortisol and adrenaline back down after the session, allowing you to start the recovery process much faster. As long as cortisol is elevated, the recovery process, the rebuilding process, both from a protein synthesis standpoint or a glycogen replenishment standpoint, will be lower. The quicker you can bring cortisol down after a workout, the faster you can recover from that session. So if you look at an hypertrophy or higher volume workout, I like to have the carbs pre and intra workout. Because if you do mostly like hypertrophy work, lighter pump stuff, less demanding exercise, more machine, more pulleys, whatever, you don't need that like aggressiveness that you have a knife in your teeth and you want to kill that tiger, right? You can actually be like, you don't need to be hyper to function well during those type of workout. However, having the carbs before and after will lower cortisol, allowing you to recover from that specific kind of workout faster. For a strength and power session, I like to keep the carbs post-workout because I actually want my athlete to have high adrenaline when training, so you can actually perform better. But right after the session, I want to shut that down as fast as possible to initiate the recovery process as fast as possible and to avoid adrenergic or adrenaline overstimulation, keeping adrenaline high for hours and hours after the workout, which will increase the likelihood of a training burnout or a crash after the session. For a mixed workout, like strength and size, like you do one big lift, one assistance lift, and the rest is bodybuilding stuff, for example, I like to use carbs intra-workout, which I would start at the midpoint of the session. For example, if a workout, you have a bench press, after that you have incline dumbbell press, then you have dumbbell flies, you have pec deck and cable crossover. I don't recommend that workout, it's an example. Then you would start to drink your carbs when you finish the assistance exercise, the incline dumbbell press. For the first two ones, being carbs less can magnify the adrenaline response, allowing you to perform better. Then you have those carbs that will allow you to lower cortisol when you do the volume. However, you can only do that with a carb that is extremely easy to absorb, like anibrench cyclodextrin, for example. Now, how much should you take and when? So if your strategy is using carbs pre and intra workout, okay, so more for a volume or hypertrophy workout that is not as intense when it comes to heavy weights and stuff like that, the minimum I would recommend would be 15 grams pre and 15 grams intra. The maximum would be 40-40. You know, it's not one or the other. You can like move around in that zone depending on how you are reacting. The timing would be 15 to 20 minutes before the session, and then you would sip the rest during the session. If you limit your carbs to post-workout, I would use at least 30 grams. Okay, 30 grams will allow you to replenish a large proportion of the glycogen stores. At the max, I would use is 100 grams. You don't need more than that. Even like a crazy high volume workout, like German volume training, for example, does not use more than 100 grams of carbohydrates in the form of stored glycogen, okay? So you can probably more than replenish everything with 100 grams of carbs post-workout. You would take that right after the session is over. And if you use it intra and post, like with the mixed type of training, you would use at the minimum 15 grams at both intakes, and the maximum would be 40 grams intra and 60 gram post. Again, you don't need more than 100 grams total. Now, of course, you will see bodybuilders, competitive bodybuilders using drugs, use a lot more carbohydrates than that around the workout. In their case, they are not using the carbohydrates to replenish muscle glycogen or anything. In fact, and that's what people don't understand when it comes to using insulin as a bodybuilder. Insulin is not used by a bodybuilder. Some actually think that's what they're doing. The main benefit of insulin for a bodybuilder, which allows you to build more muscle, is not to send more glucose or more amino acids inside the muscle, okay? That's not what it does because, what it does is that insulin, synthetic insulin, actually increases IGF-1 levels. The two that will have the greatest impact will be Humalog and also the Lantus. But Lantus is more dangerous. But Humalog is what most bodybuilders will use around the workout. And actually, Humalog will increase IGF-1 levels. The more insulin they can take, the more they spike IGF-1, which is the most anabolic hormone in the body. The reason why they are taking carbs is to allow them to use more insulin to get more IGF-1. Because if you have a very high insulin injection and not enough carbs, you will have you will become hypoglycemic or even go into a diabetic coma. Okay, so really it's more a matter of they are using those tons of carbs to be able to use more insulin to get more IGF-1. But if you're natural, there is really no reason to take more than 100 grams of carbohydrates around the workout. Okay, you would take them intra and post at the midpoint of the session, so after your big lifts and right after the session. So that's how you take your carbohydrates. Now, can I add anything else? I don't want this video to be like a supplement sales pitch, but there are a few things that can be added to those carbohydrates to magnify the impact. Pre-workout, you can add easily absorbed protein, an hydrolysate or an isolate. Anything else might take too long to get into the bloodstream. Of course, if you add like a protein-containing meal, an hour and a half before the workout, you don't need to add more protein. You already have amino acids inside your bloodstream. You can use as high as 3 grams of tyrosine. Tyrosine will actually amp you up without acting as a stimulant. It only increases dopamine, which can also support adrenaline production. So it can make you more motivated, more driven without having the drawbacks of overstimulating the receptors like an ephedrine, like caffeine or stuff like that would. You can have taurine, which would help regulate the nervous system. You can have, and also it's very important for protein synthesis. Taurine is the most abundant amino acid inside the muscle tissue. Glutamine is the most abundant in the body, but it's mostly in the bloodstream and other tissues. Taurine is the most abundant amino acid inside the muscle, and it's very important for protein synthesis. Electrolytes can also be added to make sure that you don't become dehydrated, to facilitate nutrients transport, and so on and so forth. And of course, when you are dehydrated, you can't perform well. Intra-workout, you can also add some easily absorbed protein, like hydrolysate or essential amino acids. I always favor a complete protein over hydrolysate, over amino acids though. And post-workout, which is where I personally invest most of my money in, and with my athletes, it's glycine, magnesium, and protein to add it to the carb. The glycine would be taken first, like 10 minutes before your shake with the carbs and protein, for example. Glycine is an amino acid. It is super cheap, and it does so many good things for a lifter. First, it will calm your brain down, decrease cortisol, decrease adrenaline, allow you to be chill after that workout. It also increases serotonin. Serotonin is also a neurotransmitter that allows you to balance out adrenaline and keep you calmer. It helps you sleep and relax and adapt to different stresses. It also activates mTOR more than any other amino acids except leucine. So basically, leucine and glycine are the 2 amino acids that have the greatest impact on mTOR activation. mTOR basically is the driver of protein synthesis. When you activate mTOR levels, you will increase protein synthesis. So having glycine post-workout can magnify the protein synthesis response from that session. I would also add magnesium, ideally magnesium taurate. Magnesium, all forms of magnesiums, once they're broken down between the magnesium and the amino acids attached to the magnesium, it's broken down. Like magnesium taurate is magnesium plus taurine. Okay, magnesium glycinate is magnesium plus glycine. Calcium magnesium is calcium and magnesium. So once it's broken down, the magnesium is the same magnesium. So the magnesium, its benefit is it will actually dislocate the adrenaline from the adrenergic receptors, allowing you to decrease adrenergic activation, reducing the risk of a burnout or problem recovery. Now, the taurine, would also increase GABA, and it's the most abundant amino acid inside the muscle, and it also helps you regulate your nervous system. When it's too high, it brings you down. When it's too low, it brings you up. So it's a great adaptogen amino acid. Magnesium taurate, 250 to 500 milligrams. Magnesium is better absorbed in smaller, more frequent doses. So I prefer to have 3 intakes of 500 milligrams than one intake of 150, 1500 or 2000 milligrams. It would be after the workout at 5 p.m. and before bed, for example. And finally, we'll have a protein after the workout. Now, at that point, you don't need a lightning fast protein. You can go with a regular whey protein that's fast enough. You can even go with an easily digestible solid protein like eggs, something like that. That will be fine. So these are the strategies I use to allow myself and athletes I train to recover faster from the workout and have better workout performance. It's slightly shorter than my other videos, but not yet where I want to be. So I'm going to have a lot more work to do in the future. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, like, hit the bell, and comment how awesome I am in the comment section. See you next time.